Hi, this is Lisa McManus from America's Test Kitchen Gearheads, and I'm here to answer some of your questions that you left in the comments on our video about taking care of your knives. Let's get right into it. The first one question I have never answered completely: how do you know when to use each method of sharpening and honing? That's a great question, and we hear it a lot. You know, when you've had your knife really sharp, you can feel when it starts to get dull. Like, you really notice. It's a very clear difference. For me, once I really picked up a very sharp knife, there was no going back. And then you start getting a little fussy. I mean, it's like a lot of other things. You get a sense for it, you feel it, not cutting as neatly, not going exactly where you want it to go. When it feels a little bit off and you know you've sharpened it recently, try honing first. I know a lot of restaurant chefs, or all restaurant chefs, say that they hone before every shift just to get their knife back in perfect shape. They may not go through a whole sharpening session, and they may not need to because it's generally a sharp knife. If you do something really difficult with your knife, maybe something you maybe shouldn't have done, like try to cut through frozen food, which all knife people say never do that, or pry things apart with something, that's how you can chip your blade. If you do something really severe with your knife, or it's really done a lot of work, or you've had to cut on some very hard cutting board, you probably do need to do a little bit more sharpening rather than honing. But if it's just starting to feel like it's not quite as sharp as it was, hone and check it out. If it doesn't feel better, sharpen. And again, with the multi-stage electric sharpener that I demonstrated, you don't have to go back to stage one. That's a very coarse reshaping of the whole knife. That's really only if it's really dull or has some damage. Start with the middle one and then do the final, which is a medium coarse diamond hone, and the final, which is a stropping and polishing disc. You can also use that particular one if you don't have a hone in place of a hone. The third disc is kind of the equivalent of a hone. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, let's see. Someone says, I wish you had talked about everyday care. Don't toss knives in the sink. I'm trying to train myself to wash after every use and put away in the knife block. Knives stored resting on their blade should be kept upside down in the slots. I'm sure ATK can come up with more. Yeah, those are good ones. Never put your knife in the dishwasher. It's just too harsh an environment. The soap is very acidic. It will etch your metal. It will make them dull. It can knock into things. You can cut yourself trying to reach in there to empty the dishwasher. It's just wash it by hand quickly after you use it, pat it dry, and put it away. We've tested knife guards, universal knife blocks, and various ways to store your knives. There's also a very simple way, which is just to fold a piece of cardboard and get some duct tape or whatever and make a blade cover for it, and then slide that in the drawer. You don't have to have anything fancy or buy anything, but if you want a knife block for your knives and it didn't come with, because we usually say don't buy a knife set, buy individual knives. And then they don't come with a block. So we do have a testing of knife blocks on our website, and knife blade guards that just snaps over the blade. If you're going to travel with your knives, you can look at getting a knife roll the way chefs have for traveling. It's a big, kind of almost like a purse for the knives. They go in and then it rolls up and latches. But you should store them carefully. Having the blades exposed just risks, knocking into other things or your hand, or, as you're putting it away. You can also get a magnetic knife strip, and those are great. If you ever go to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. and see Julia Child's kitchen, she has her magnetic knife strips on the wall, but most people hang them horizontally and hang the knives vertically like this. She had hers between the windows in her kitchen. They went up and she put her knives across, which I thought was so interesting. It's just a good way to use the space that is otherwise not used. But anyway, storing them in some way that keeps them from knocking into other things or cutting you is always a good thing to do. Don't put them in the dishwasher. Keep them dry, especially if it's a carbon steel knife. In between, just wipe it dry. Get a dish towel and just use it for that. And that will make them last a lot longer. And also consider your type of cutting board you're using. Some of them are very hard. Never cut on a glass board. I think I've said this 1,000 times, but I was able to dull a knife just cutting 10 times on a glass board, from brand new, able to cut, to just smushed and wrecked and couldn't cut. So glass is too hard. Look at, a nice wood board or some plastic boards. Our boards, when we test them, we actually look at that, and we do lots and lots of cuts on them to see which ones not only don't get all chopped up by the knife, but don't damage the knife. Here's another question. If we sharpen daily with the electric, do we just pull it through stage 3, or do all 3 stages regularly? I think I just touched on that a little bit, but you probably don't need to sharpen daily unless you're a restaurant chef and you're in there doing a ton of prep. Your knife will last a little longer than that. Also, if you're careful, don't bang your knife down. Try to cut more. If you look at how chefs cut, they rock the knife, or they slice very gently. They're not banging that knife down very hard, so that's also a thing to keep your eye on. And yeah, if you are sharpening more than every now and then, just do the stage 3. And keep an eye on it. Just feel it. You'll feel when it starts to dull, especially, as I said, if you get used to a sharp knife. You suddenly are like, okay, this is not sharp enough for me anymore, and you will keep it up. We have a question. I noticed in your description of both the electric and manual sharpeners, no mention was made of the sharpening angle. I have both German knives with the traditional 20-degree edge and Japanese knives with a 15-degree edge. Is there a sharpener that is adjustable? Yeah, there are some that are adjustable. The ones that we were demonstrating were for 15-degree edges, because our winning chef's knife by Victorinox Swiss Army, the Fibrox Pro 8-inch chef's knife, is a 15-degree angle knife. So even though it's made in, Switzerland or something, it seems like a Western knife. It has what was traditionally a Japanese or Asian angle to the knife that is 15 degrees. It's a little bit narrower. So we're talking about on each side of the center line of the blade. So the point is, a 20 degree or 15 degree. The 15 is, more upright and seems narrower. We really like that. It feels much more precise to us when you've, used both the 20. They're like 20 to 22 degree angle knives, and the 15s just feel like they're slipping in there and cutting without wedging the food. So you do want to address that by using the sharpener that goes with the style of knife that you have. When you get a 20 degree a knife that is made for a 20 degree angle, and you sharpen it to 15, it's a softer steel. It may not be able to hold that 15 degree angle for as long as one that's designed as a 15 degree, but if you're willing to resharpen, that's fine. A lot of information in there, but yes, the ones that we demonstrated are 15 degree angle. We also have one, the Chef's Choice Model 130, which is for a 20 degree angle knife. Someone suggested that we try the Work Sharp Ken Onion Edition sharpener, and I just wanted to say I did try that in my most recent testing of electric sharpeners. I loved it. I thought it was great, but if you take a look at it, it's all exposed. Like, the Chef's Choice has a housing over it and has magnets in it that grab the filings and store them, and you can pull this little thing out the bottom and clean the filings off. So it contains any metal that comes off the blade. Anytime you sharpen, metal is going to come off that blade. It's microscopic, but it does happen, whether you're using a whetstone or an electric sharpener or a manual sharpener. And those machines collect the metal shavings and keep it inside. The whole operation is inside the housing, and the angle guards are there so that you can't wiggle the knife around. The Ken Onion is all out in the open, and it's, the belts, they have little sharpening belts that you put on, and you can adjust the angle, and everything just flies everywhere. You have metal shavings everywhere, all over the counter and your face. It's kind of a mess, but it's awesome, and there's great control. If you're into that and you have a place for it, like a basement or something, it's great. Again, it's a little bit harder to use. There wasn't as much guidance about the angle, but I thought it was terrific, and it did give you a ton of flexibility. But I felt like it wasn't as fail-proof as like the Chef's Choice, which gives you a very narrow guide, and so you can't wiggle that knife around and hit it at the wrong angle. It's always going to get the same angle on each side. And also just containing the mess and making it easier to sharpen. The whole point of the exercise of sharpening is to get you back to cooking, not to sit around sharpening and obsessing over that, which a lot of people do. Okay. Someone asked if the Electric or manual sharpeners lead to scratches along the sides. And they said that's why they like to use a manual whetstone or similar for expensive knives. Um, yeah, you can get some little scratching along the sides. Um, I guess from my point of view, it's totally cosmetic. It's not damaging your knife in any way if you get these little light scratches along the sides of the blade about half an inch up. If you have a really fancy, expensive knife and you're worried about getting a little scratch on the side of it, um, I guess, yeah, sure. The whetstone can also, scratch it up if you do it wrong. But, if you feel that you want to do it that way, that's fine. There's no really wrong way as long as you're getting a sharper knife. And again, I guess I question like getting such a perfect, expensive knife that you're afraid to sharpen and use it. It's a tool. It's not a piece of art. I mean, some of these knives are beautiful and they're very expensive, but you got to think about, the point of practical tool use that you're not afraid to use, that you're willing to cut up your food and make your dinner. That's kind of how I think about it. Can we just use the honing side of the manual sharpener instead of a standalone dedicated honing rod? Yes, again, the final slot of the manual sharpener is a finer, more delicate, polishing, honing stage. So just for a daily touch up or whenever you're feeling it's a little bit off, for both the manual and the electric sharpener that we talked about, if you don't have a honing rod, that last slot in there, a few strokes, it should be much better. And finally, one person wrote in and said, "We wish that ATK had a poverty test kitchen option. Some of these prices aren't realistic with most people's pandemic budgets these days, and we understand that. Um, so here's what I think. If you look at the characteristics of what we looked for in these sharpeners, the manual sharpener is about $45. I guess it's a lot of money. It makes cooking so much easier that I kind of think it's worth it. But if that's really not in the budget, look at the characteristics that we looked for. We wanted something that we liked the diamond coated wheels because they're really good at any kind of steel that you're going to put in there. We liked narrow slots that didn't give a lot of play for the knife. And we looked for, ones that had multiple slots that went from coarser to finer, and that were easy for people left or right-handed to use, and really anchored on the countertop and didn't scoot around too much. If you can find a honing rod, again, the things we liked about that one were that it had a finer and coarser sides, but both were fairly fine. We didn't like the ones that were coated with diamonds and that were very rough and that were called sharpening rods. Those just chewed up our knives. We liked that ceramic rod, the Idaho, which was our best buy. It's much more affordable than the Bob Kramer Zwilling, although that one is gorgeous. We liked the longer rod and a comfortable handle without too much flare at the top of the handle so that you could get that knife right in at an angle that's 15 degrees and follow through. So, any honing rod that's reasonable, even if it's shorter, just be more careful as you're coming through. You don't have as much of a runway to bring the knife down, but you can be careful and do that. And sometimes you can find great things at, yard sales and Goodwill and stuff for like $1. I do that all the time. And if you kind of know what characteristics you're looking for, you can pick up things for very inexpensively. But I would urge you to consider, our Victorinox favorite knife sells for as little as $27. Sometimes it's like $27 to $45. It kind of varies. And our manual sharpener is about $45. That's less than $100 for a really good knife and a great basic sharpener, and those will keep you in business cooking at home, which is cheaper than eating out or any of the other options. Making food from scratch at home is much cheaper than anything else. So, it's kind of like you have to kind of weigh the options, and I don't know what the situation fully is, but those are some things to think about. I hope that was helpful, and I hope we'll see you next time on Gearheads.